Welcome to Big Love with Ariel Ford, known as the Cupid of Consciousness and the Fairy Godmother of Love. Ariel and her guests will share with you the secrets to finding and keeping the love of your life, as well as ways to make your life a spiritual adventure. Join us now for a heart-opening and inspiring hour.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Big Love. And before I introduce you to my very interesting guest, I want to give you a little bit of news. So I've just published a new book on Amazon. It's actually the first book I ever wrote. It's the newest, latest edition of it. And it's called The Everything Book, The Essential Details About the One You Love. And it's this very cool fill-in-the-blank journal-like book for couples to fill out so that you know absolutely everything about each other. Because I'm sure by now most of you have read or taken the 5 love languages quiz and you know what your partner's love language is. But I'll bet you don't know how they would best like you to fulfill it. So this has, just like your refrigerator comes with an owner's manual and it tells you everything about it, that's what the Everything Book is. So if that sounds interesting to you, check it out. It's only available as a paperback on Amazon, The Everything Book. So today we're going to talk a lot about communication and the differences between men and women and how we talk to each other and how to be more effective at communicating. And my guest is Robert Kandell, and that's Kandell. You can find him at robertkandell.com. And he's an interpersonal communication expert. He's a speaker. He has a podcast called Tuff Love, and that's Tuff Love. And he's the author of the best-selling book, Unhidden, a book for men and those confused by them. Very cool title. Since 2002, he's been on a very big mission to help people find themselves and use their internal power to live their best lives. He's helped thousands level up their communication, which will lead you to a more balanced, energized, connective, and purposeful life. So, welcome, Robert.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'm excited to learn more about you and what you do. And give us sort of the short story of how you came to be Robert Kandell.
My story is that I was normal till I was around 28. What I mean by normal was just living the path laid out to me by my culture, my family, my father, and was doing really well, but was also married, disconnected, not having any sex, workaholic, overweight, just all the negative sides of living a life that wasn't connected to who I really was. Then in 1998, at 28, I went to Burning Man, which etched a sketch my entire life with some experiences. Came back to San Francisco where I was living with my wife, started to explore myself and my sexuality, and eventually in 2004, co-founded One Taste, which researched and educated around sex and communication, intimacy. Did that for 10 years. Left in 2014, and since then have been living in Los Angeles with my second wife, Morgan, exploring our relationship. I'm a podcaster, author, and helping couples and individuals and more on how to live more connected, authentic, fulfilled lives.
Great story. So let's start today with what you call superior communication. You know, what is that? And what's the best way to tell your partner the truth?
Okay, great. So my viewpoint is that we're trained to be mediocre communicators. We're actually taught to withhold. And in my world, withholding is akin to lying. We think that we're doing a service to our partners or intimate friends by holding back parts of ourselves, from things that we're ashamed of to things that we want, that we're worried about saying. And what we do is we create masks, facades, images around us. And our partners are doing the same thing. And so we have facade interacting with facade, not telling the truth to keep the status quo, and it leads to less intimacy and less communication because you're afraid to really show deeper parts of yourself. And the second part of your question on how to tell your partner the truth is to build a practice around it. Just like you want to learn golf or piano or tennis or knitting, build a practice around deliberate, clear, honest, valid, true communication where your truth can be said and rewarded. And I have some techniques for that, but that's sort of the high level view.
Okay, so give us sort of an example of a typical thing that a couple may be withholding on and how you would instruct them to have this deliberate, clear communication.
Okay, great. So let's just assume it's a heterosexual couple and it's a woman withholding from a man. It could be something as mundane as desire, but let's make it a little more chargy. Maybe she's having an emotional relationship with another man in her office. Not physical, just there's feelings arising. And she's so afraid of revealing to her husband, her partner, that this is happening. So what I would recommend is the woman says to the man, honey, there's something I want to talk to you about. Can we sit down tonight and have this conversation? Now, the guy immediately is going to be like, wait, what do you want to talk about? What's happening? What's going on? And the woman, I just want to encourage not to reveal. Just say, listen, everything is fine. I just want to talk to you about something that's going on, and set a time. So in that time, no cell phones, no music, get the kids handled, no distractions, turn everything off so you can focus on each other. Then here's the first step that's unusual. I recommend to the woman to apologize to the man, not for the emotional affair or what's happening, but of the withholding of the information, and then to give him the reasoning behind it. So she might say something like, I want to tell you I've been withholding something from you. And what's the reason is because I'm afraid of your reaction. And I want to apologize for not trusting in our relationship. I want to apologize for the impact it's had. I just want to let you know that I'm sorry that I withheld, and I'm not sure what the impact is, but I know it has some. Hopefully he'll say, okay, what is it? Then the woman will say, I'm having this interaction, this relationship with this man in work. It's just emotional. It's not physical. And this is what's happening. And for her to say it with as little detail and least words as possible, just say the thing. Then ask for him to give his response, his impact, and to give him space. And then for the woman to validate his feelings and then have a dialogue around it and keep talking until it's flat. This enables the truth to be told and the space for the man to have all his feelings and to build reconnection and rapport for this thing that she was hiding.
So does that have her stop having the emotional affair? Like take us further down the path with you on how it could go or how it might go. That's fascinating.
Well, that's a fun question. Well, I'm going to segue a little to the left and I'll come back to your question. My personal belief system is that we are dynamic human beings. We are constantly evolving and we're constantly transforming. So who you are at 18, 22, 25, 35, 40, 50 evolves. And guess what? Your partner is the same thing. He or she is going to be evolving along with it. And what happens is that we set patterns and we set agreements. Some of them are overt, but most of them are covert. And one of those coverts could be that you're not allowed to have emotional affairs with other people. You're not allowed to even have feelings or thoughts. And so what do you do when you have them? You tend to hide them. My belief and my practice with my wife is to give permission for all of her humanity, of all of who she can be. I'm not saying action, I'm just saying who she is. And I'm curious about who she is, what's motivating her to have that. In that curiosity, she no longer has to hide it. She can show me, and I can do the same for her. And so we're not hiding from each other. We're not making ourselves smaller to fit into the box of our relationship. So in this hypothetical situation, if the man actually said, "Oh, I'm so glad you told me. I'm so glad that you have this. And, I don't want you to have any physical interactions with this other person, but how wonderful that you have this feelings." Or he might say, I'm confronted. What does this mean about us? And what does it mean about me? And what about, or he might not care, who knows? But you open up the dialogue. In the dialogue, there's so much opportunity to learn about each other and the intimacy and the curiosity and the motivations. And yes, feelings will arise, but wouldn't you rather be and know your partner than for them to hide from you? That's my view.
Yeah, oh, that does make a lot of sense. I mean, I'm trying to place myself in that situation to see what it would be like, because I would think, depending on who the person is, like Brian and I we have our celebrity crushes, right?
Okay.
That we talk about, except pretty much his celebrity crushes are not women I'm threatened by. I'll give you an example. He is crazy about Donna Brazile, the political pundit, crazy about Doris Kearns Goodwin. And if he could have dinner with Madeleine Albright, that would be the highlight of his life. So there's no cause for, do I have anything to worry about here, right? And he doesn't seem to care that I think Bradley Cooper's amazing looking, and he knows that if Sting showed up, I might need to go out for the night. So we're able to talk about it that way. But I would think, if he were going to an office every day, which he doesn't, he's retired, and he said he was having an emotional affair with somebody, that would be a difficult conversation. And of course, a very important one. So what do you advise couples when, let's say in your scenario, the wife reveals to the husband, "I'm having an emotional affair," and the guy's like freaked out and jealous? How do you handle that?
Well, first, it is important to know that jealousy is right. I actually have jealousy as one of the most powerful, enriching, expansive emotions you can have. And it's very difficult because we're not trained to interact or even acknowledge it. So if he feels jealous, I think that's great. Now, the connection and the validation around it is important. I totally understand why you're jealous. I would be jealous too. I want to know, I want all of you to come out, all of you to be there. Let's keep talking. What does it mean to you that I'm having an emotional affair? What are you scared of? What's going on for you? I can tell you, if you were having an emotional affair, this would mean for me. And so instead of trying to pack it down and make it smaller, I'm saying open it up so all of you can be seen and approved of and known. And I'm not saying this is an easy 5-minute, 10-minute conversation. This could be months of dialogue. So I understand why people don't do it, but I do think to have the optimized relationship, you need to talk about all parts of yourself rather than hide it.
You just reminded me of a funny story when it's in my book, Wabi Sabi Love, about this man. God, I can't think of his real name. Let's just call him John. And John and Mary are married. And John has a lot of jealousy issues, and his wife is very attractive. And it was causing a lot of rifts between them because she was just a gregarious person. She was never cheating on him, and yet his jealousy would flare up. And the way they fixed it is one night they were at a party and she was chatting up some guy and he felt the jealousy come. But rather than react in his normal way, he walked over to her, he put his arm around her waist, brought her in tight, and faked this Italian accent and said, "Oh, my darling, I'm so madly in love with you. Please, let's go outside for a little walk." And he just sort of turned it around and made it fun and playful. And that became his persona. Whenever he felt jealousy, he would just act out this Italian lover boy character.
I would say that's good, and I actually think he's actually missing an opportunity. So my view on that is, what is the jealousy telling him? What's the part of him? What is the insecurity? What is going on underneath the surface? And if that's what he wanted to do, it's great. But there's also an opportunity. Like, I use jealousy now, after many, many years of training and many, many jealous situations, to let jealousy inform me. When I feel jealous, it's actually something that I want or some doubt I have inside of myself. And so we shun jealousy. We shun the darker emotions. But for me, they're opportunity to explore the richness of our humanity, to understand how to play with it better.
That makes sense. So tell me a little bit about how men and women communicate differently.
Oh, well, so let's take a step aside. So there's a concept of masculine and feminine. So everyone has a mixture of masculine energy and feminine energy inside of them. And this, what I call the masculine-feminine ratio, changes over time, and also changes depending on the circumstance. So, I was a very masculine man for a long time until I was encouraged to connect to my feminine. Now I have this wonderful ratio that alters over time. There are times when my masculine is called forth most of the time, but there's also time where my feminine, my receptive, my receiving, my intuition is called forth depending on the situation. In terms of communication, masculine communication, its goal, its motivation is one of production. I want to move the box from point A to point B. The feminine part of communication is more about relationship and intimacy. So it doesn't care about the production. It cares how you feel about moving the box from point A to point B. When you have a masculine man wanting to do something and a feminine woman wanting to relate, it can often lead to conflict because neither person understands or appreciates the motivation of each. That's why men often get mad when women want to talk and want to understand his motivation. He's like, I just want to move the box from point A to point B. Why do I need to talk about my feelings? While the feminine woman really wants to understand his experience because she wants to feel the intimacy around it. So understanding the different goals is a way to have better communication, because then you can understand, oh, he's just in his productive mode, or, oh, she wants to feel closer to me. That will increase the flow of communication.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, it's like, while you were saying that, I was realizing Brian and I are flipped in that way, because I'm like, if there's any kind of difficult conversation or dialogue, I want to get it flat as fast as humanly possible and then never talk about it again, ever. And he likes to talk for hours and then the next day go through it again. It was like, oh, I thought we were done with this. But
right.
Now that I've learned, it's like, okay, I know what I'm in for here.
Right.
So I know that one of the things you offer your students is structures on how to have a more honest relationship. Talk about that a little bit.
It's really about getting things clear to enable, again, all of your humanity to come out. And so we don't put a lot of attention. Most people don't put a lot of attention on setting structures up for success. And what happens is we're moving so fast in life that a lot of stuff just gets put on the shelf. So one of the things I do with my family is that every Friday, we have the kids every other week. I'm a stepfather to two young girls. Every Friday, we have a family meeting where we can talk about the things that are going well and the things we want to improve in our relating. So, for example, my older daughter has the habit of constantly interrupting when Morgan and I speak. And while Morgan is much more in the flow, it bristles me. It impacts me. And so in a family meeting, we had a conversation to let her know that this was impacting me, not from a you're doing it wrong, but just from an educational point of view. And she may not know that. And now she does it about half the time she used to, because she can tell that this affects me. We don't do this with each other. We don't even inform each other about what's happening. We just kind of expect them to read our minds. Women do this more than men. Like, if I think loud enough, he'll finally hear me, right? But without the overt communication, without the laying it down in really basic terms, we often miss each other. So again, you can have a family conversation, you can have a relationship conversation, a check-in, and bring to that meeting all the things that are going really well and the things that you want to improve.
Oh, I love that. And you reminded me of something I heard Jack Canfield say once, that, once a week or every 2 weeks, he'll ask his wife, what can I do to make your life better?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is a really a question. The only problem is every time I ask Brian that, he said nothing could be better than this. He's never, ever given me a straight answer about what I could do to make his life better. Which means
it sounds
I'm
like his feminine is wily. Yeah, he's got a wily feminine in
there. Well, he's a Gemini, so that makes sense.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So let's talk about sex. Tell us some of the ways we can ask for what we want in bed that will also keep your partner feeling validated.
Oh, okay. Well, first off, don't talk about it in bed.
Okay, great.
There's nothing worse for a man in the heat of a moment for an adjustment.
Okay.
Without understanding the adjustment. So masculine or men tend to get their approval, their validation from their production. Women tend to get their validation, their self-approval on their attractiveness, on how much they can attract. So for a man in the middle of a sex act, wanting to produce an experience, a feeling, an orgasm for a woman, he'll feel invalidated if she expresses a desire, right? Now, a woman at the same time wants to feel loved and adored. She wants to feel like the light. And so when the man is not considering, what she wants, then she feels disconnected and diminished. So what we do is we just sort of think really loud and don't get what we want inside the bedroom. A woman might be laying there thinking softer, 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 slower, slower, slower. And the man's not responding because he's focused on his production. And all of a sudden you have this disconnection between the two people in the bedroom. So what I recommend is out of the bedroom, set up communication patterns and structures so there can be success. For a woman to say, hey, I love our sex life. I think it's amazing. I feel your attention. I feel your desire. I feel your wanting to produce. And there are times where I'm having trouble communicating what I want. How do you want me to handle that? What words do you want me to use in that moment to let you know that I want something different? Hopefully he'll say, wow, great. If you did this, this, and this, that would feel great to me. It could be a tap on the shoulder. It could be a specific word. Because he wants the woman's feedback. He just wants it in a way that his ego doesn't get hit by it. So the ability for the couple to create communication pathways, clear, deliberate communication pathways, is a way to enhance your sex life.
Let me ask you something. So if part of that structure were he remembers in the middle of everything to say something like, anything I could do more or less of, or something like that, would that be useful or would that be deflating?
Well, there's a mix of that. When a woman is in orgasm, there are parts of her prefrontal cortex that actually shuts down. There's research that show in an MRI that different parts of the thinking part of the brain that shuts down, and other part of the limbic system, the sensing and feeling part, that actually lights up. So if a guy asks a woman, Do you want, is this feel good, or kind of esoteric questions? It'll take her out of her feeling and into her thinking is what you don't want. But you can ask what we like to call winning questions, questions that are yes or no. Would you like this lighter? Would you like this slower? Would you like me to move a little to the right? Would you like me to move a little to the left? It's just simple yes or no questions, which actually work well in intense sexual situations.
Oh, fascinating. You got some good information here. Okay, so let's talk about what's happening with men in the 21st century, and what it's like for men now that we're in this Me Too world. Tell me your deepest thoughts on this.
Okay, great. This is a thesis and one of the most important parts of my book. Men are trained not to speak their emotions, not to talk about their feelings, which is making the situation worse. I also want to say that I am a huge fan and supporter of the Me Too movement. I know there are moments where it's rocky and misused, but overall, I think Me Too is one of the most important social experiences in my generation, where women are speaking what their truth is, which I think is of paramount importance. So my viewpoint is that if you look at the history of the patriarchy has been around for 6,000 years. So generation after generation, hundreds of generations of men have built patterns and habits of what it means to be a man in society. Then you look at the last 170 years, there's been some pretty epic changes, starting with the women's suffrage movement around 1850, to the 19th Amendment, which happened in 1920, to World War II, where women actually went to the workforce, to the shutting down of women in the 1950s and 1960s. If you can read The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan, there was actually trying to push women back into their place, quote, air quotes, place, that didn't quite work. And then 1960s and 70s, what we've seen is the rise of women, the adding of women's programs to the schooling system, especially around the areas of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, where girls, women under 18, were encouraged to excel. Now you look at the beginning of the 21st century, and you're seeing some pretty epic changes. The schooling system, which was predominantly men in the 1970s, 66% of graduates, is now flipped, where girls and young women and women are dominating from PhD to grade school. You look at the gender pay gap, which was 64 cents of a woman's dollar to a man's dollar in 1980, is now 93 cents for a white millennial woman entering the workforce. So what's happened in the last 50 years compared to the 6,000-year history is a very quick evolution of women's power. They're not equal, but they're rising in power. And what's happening is men don't know who to be, how to act, and the scripts of their fathers and grandfathers are not working in the 21st century. Add in Me Too, which added fear and pressure and containment for men. They're not quite stepping up to the challenge to say, okay, the world is changing. Men are actually shrinking. They're actually shying away. They're moving towards porn, video games, sex dolls. There's a whole group in Japan of men under 30 who are virgins and have no desire to interact with women. And so we're actually seeing men shrink in the 21st century.
That's so true. Yeah, and those sex robots. I saw a whole piece on it on TV. They're so real looking. I could see if you're a lazy guy and you have some social issues. There's the latest hottest one looks exactly like Ivanka Trump. The thing I saw. But we won't go political. All right. So how are you advising the millennial men on how to date and relate to women in this era of Me Too, where there's so much sensitivity and, simple flirting could be easily misconstrued?
I think the most important thing is it's very simple. in concept, but difficult to implement. But it's to be a gentleman. And what I mean by being a gentleman is to go slow, to over communicate, and hear responses, take feedback. I think most of the Me Too experiences are men who are so focused, again, on their production and their goals, is they're oblivious to the signals that women are giving that this is not okay. They're so stuck in their ego. They're so stuck in their tunnel vision, they're not seeing. And the men I train are ones who are willing, again, to slow down enough for the speed of sensation, not to be weak or not powerful, but just slow down enough to pay attention, to look for all types of cues beyond verbal cues, nonverbal cues, learn to watch facial gestures and noises. And then also just to be like, I'm open to be trained. I'm open to stop in the middle of any sensation or any experience that doesn't feel good. I want to know what your experience is. If a man is willing to overtly say these things, not from fear, but from power, it actually is a refreshing moment for women who wants a man to be everything, from the dominating pirate to the receptive man. And his willingness to be aware, to have presence in every moment, is ultimately very attractive to women.
Yes. And so if I hear you correctly, it's kind of like, so they would ask permission. I am very attracted to you. I'd really like to kiss you. Is that okay? Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, and we can do overtly like that. But I don't know if you saw the movie Hitch by Will Smith.
I did. I don't remember it well, but I know that I saw it years ago.
To me, it is the ultimate form of consent. So in the movie, Will Smith is teaching his client, Kevin James, how to make the first kiss, right? Mm-hmm. And Will Smith talks about the lean, that going in at 90%. It's a hilarious scene, but it's awesome. Because what he does is he shows his desire. He shows his intent. He's taking the first step to lean in 90% and then wait for the woman to cross over for the last 10%. Now, in the scene, Kevin James just kisses him, and it's a funny end to the scene. But what happens if you're willing to show to a woman, I'm willing to be vulnerable, I'm willing to take the chance, and we're going to do this in connection, then she has a choice to be like, not ready yet, or maybe, or okay, let's try this for a second and take a kiss to see if it works out. There's a way to do nonverbal consent if you feel the vibe, but always, if you can ask for verbal consent, that's the safest way to do it.
Yeah, because, if you look at the popularity of women's erotica and 50 Shades of Grey and all of that, mm-hmm. A lot of the straight women that I know and have talked to and show up in my rooms, want to be ravished, right? They want some guy to really take control. And yet at the same time, in this environment, you actually need permission. Like, how would you ask for permission for that?
Well, that is the ultimate challenge for men, because we're getting extreme mixed messages of who we should be. I want you to take me and ravish me, but then I'm going to turn around because of A, B, and C, and then, me to you, whatever that verb is. Right. And so men are very angry and very confused because of this mixed message. Throw in the mess of free porn, which has really only been around for about 10 years, and young men and men getting their education from porn, and you have a communication nightmare between the genders. And so again, have the conversation about your sex life outside the bedroom. Be willing to have that conversation, like, it feels like we're getting friendly. It feels like, we've been dating for a month now, and it feels like, our makeout is getting more. How do you feel? What do you want? Do you want to have a safe word? In BDSM, safe words are words that in the middle of a scene that either participant can say at any point to communicate, stop, slow down. So you can have these conversations outside the bedroom, and then there's the security there's a curiosity that can actually have your sex life be really spontaneous with a container.
Mm. You know, I just had an idea for you, as if you don't have enough to do. But what if you created a quiz that men and women could take to sort of use and compare with each other to see where they are on the scale of being ready for sexual contact, including, you know, talking about STDs and how important that is. That would, I think, be something really helpful and useful, because, you know, it could be a fun, interactive thing you could do online together that doesn't necessarily commit you to anything, but to see if you're on the same page, so to speak.
You know, I wrote the note down. I think it's a great idea.
Oh, good. Excellent. Well, let me know when it's ready, because I'll have lots of
Thank
people to share it with. You know, because a lot of the people that I end up teaching tend to be over 40, and a lot of them are divorced and they're dating, and they're used to old school dating, right? And it's all kind of weird. And, you know, my generation, we grew up in a time where sex couldn't kill you. Now, you know, it can. In fact, I just heard the other day, they're now thinking that even Lyme disease is sexually transmitted. So there's important conversations that, you know, people need to have that you could really help with. Okay, I think we covered sex pretty well. Thank you, Robert, for that. So, what's got you most excited these days? What areas are you researching? What are the problems you hear people coming up with?
I think it really is a recurring theme of, I think I'm too big. I think this is the bane of our existence. So, and beyond that is this fear that we're going to be abandoned. I think underneath it, all of us have this basic fear that we're too much, that a partner will leave us, we'll go broke, and we'll end up dying alone under a bridge, right? Maybe the bridge is a metaphor, but most people fear this aloneness, this rejection. And what they do is they make themselves smaller, especially women. And so what my experience is giving permission for all of you, again, all of your humanity, your bigness, your darker side, your devious side, your sexual side, all the parts of yourself, to bring it out to your intimate friends. What I mean by intimate friends is not just your lovers, but the people you're close to build structures to deliberately, slowly, with consent, to allow all parts of yourself out. And how many people are closeted around their sexuality? How many people will talk to their friends about all their pain points, their mother-in-law or their bad back, but won't talk about the last great orgasm they had, or their desire for, you know, Bradley Cooper? You know, how many people won't even share, you know, their fantasies with people they consider their friends? Because I think we're afraid that our bigness will, you know, slay our friends. They'll leave and we'll end up alone. So, and guess what? We're all doing that for each other. So if one friend is willing to be like, let's create a game to reveal one part of ourselves, I'll reveal something, then you reveal something, and then we can breathe. It's like a girdle around our soul. It's like we're locked in. And if we're willing to just share who we are, you give permission to the people around you to share who they are. And all of a sudden, we're not hiding these, you know, intimate parts of ourselves.
Oh, I so agree with you. In fact, I tell the women all the time, you know, out yourself first. You know, if there's something about yourself that you know think it's going to be embarrassing or difficult, just bring it right up front. You know, and the example I like to give is that, you know, I love to eat. I'm a very enthusiastic eater. I love food, and I'm a slob. So if you're going to sit down to eat with me, my food's going to get all over me. It's going to get all over you, and I'll probably eat off your plate. And you just need to know that ahead of time. So, you know, rather than, you know, trying to not be the sloppy eater that I am, I'm just, you know, giving myself permission, like, this is who I am. If you don't like it, then don't go to dinner with me.
Right.
Yeah, I think that makes so much.
I love that.
Yeah, I think we
And
should.
you give permission to bring out their parts of themselves. And all of a sudden, we're actually relating, who we truly are rather than the facades we tend to wear.
Right, because we've been brainwashed into thinking that we need to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Every area of our life is infused with, you got to have the perfect kids, and HGTV wants you to have the perfect home, and you want to get your work perfect, and you want to look perfect. And the truth is, none of us are perfect. We never will be. So
Mm-hmm.
I think, let's share the imperfections right up front. It's a way actually to be more intimate faster, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh, completely, 100%.
So let's talk a little bit about polyamory. It seems like the millennials are really flocking to this idea. I've got my opinion about it, but I'd like to hear yours.
Okay, great. Instead of polyamory, the term I like to use is non-monogamy.
Oh, okay.
Polyamory is a specific type of non-monogamy. And here's the funny part. I think most people are more non-monogamous than they think. To go back to the emotional affair example, is
Hmm.
a form of non-monogamy. And so monogamy is a very vague, hackneyed term that means different things to every single person. So you're in a couple, again, let's go back to your example of a flirtatious woman. The jealous guy, might think that she's not being faithful or a good wife or a good woman because she's flirtatious. She might just think, well, I'm not letting anyone touch my intimate parts, so of course I'm being monogamous. And you have a difference of opinion just based on the core example of who they are. And this causes a lot of conflict because she's just like, I just want to be me. And he's being like, I don't want you to be you because it impacts me and makes me feel jealous. And all of a sudden, we're creating boxes for each other. So the first thing is to figure out what your definition of monogamy is and what you feel comfortable in your partner and what they can be.
Yes, that makes so much sense. Go ahead.
Yeah. So polyamory is one of multiple relationships. It means many loves. And so that's when you're into the point where you're actually having relations, or not even like sexual relations, but you're actually having love affairs with multiple people. So my core belief is that all of us, 99.9% of us, have the capacity to love romantically, intimately, and sexually more than one person at a time. And it's a lot of work. And we're not interested in having our life like that. Now, I'm not saying that we do. I'm just saying we have the capability. And what society tells us to do is to turn off these parts, not out of desire, but out of fear. And in that, we shut down who we are because we get into the contract of relationship, either a legal contract of marriage or just dating or being boyfriend, girlfriend. And what we do is we shut down this part of ourselves, first lying to ourselves that desire arises, and then we start to lie to our partner. And all of a sudden, again, it's just like something we shove out of our consciousness into our shadow, but it's still there and alive.
Interesting. Well, having been on the planet probably a couple decades longer than you, I've had the ability to observe polyamorous relationships in the proper usage of the term. And I've never seen one that lasted more than a couple of years, because at some point in the ones that I've observed, 2 of the 3 or 4 people got more interested in each other and left original partners to just be a twosome, which left people hurt and wounded. So my theory is most people are more comfortable in 2s than in 3s or more. And if you're gonna experiment with this stuff, I would say do it before you get legally married, because I'm a big proponent of marriage. I don't know if you've seen the science and the research done on the marriage effect. Have you heard of that?
I haven't, actually.
Okay, so what they have found on a couple of studies I've seen is in the marriage effect, people who are happily, legally married, not just living together in a committed relationship, but legally married, have longer, happier, more satisfying lives live longer, and experience less physical pain when they are ill.
Mm-hmm.
So they call it the marriage effect. However, if you're just living with somebody, even if you're in a seriously committed relationship, you don't get any of those benefits. So I talked to Harville Hendricks about this because I wanted to understand, why is it if you and your partner are in love and committed, but you're not legally married, why don't you get the benefits? And they haven't studied it enough to say definitively, but his theory is that the reptilian part of your brain knows that you could be left at any time because there is this contract there, and therefore you don't get the benefit because there's always some part of you knowing you could be abandoned. Who knows if that's true or not? So based on that, I'm still a very big fan of marriage. I think marriage is a good thing. They've also shown for kids, the studies are kids that are in a legally married home actually excel more and do better in school and are more emotionally balanced. Who knows with this stuff? Where are you on the state of marriage in the world?
I love it. I love being married. I want to be married more than my wife is, actually. And I'm a much more non-monogamous person than she is. We're in a committed monogamous relationship at the moment with what we call monogamy with guest stars. And what that means is there's an invitation, there's a possibility of other players in our relationship. And we haven't had any really for the last 2 years after we got married, because we wanted to commit to each other. So in terms of marriage, I love being married, and I do feel the stability, the difference of what you're talking about in the marriage effect in terms of it.
Yeah.
And I'll say one more thing before I pass it back is, I think all relationships are hard. I think monogamous relationships are hard. I think non-monogamous relationships are hard. Maybe hard's not the right word, but they take work, they take energy, they take attention. And I definitely know that polyamorous relationships are extremely difficult because you're adding the fuel to the fire. So I'm not one of proponents of either relationship type, but I am a proponent of honesty and truth and vulnerability, to share what's inside rather than hiding it, to actually talk to your partner about what your desire is and see how that wants to manifest in the real world.
Yeah, I totally get that. And God, I just was going to say something to you, and my aging brain is dropping things. I once asked a lot of, let's call them experts and clergy, what the purpose of marriage is. And my rabbi had one of the best answers and one of the most surprising ones. He said that the purpose of marriage is to give what is most needed, which kind of blew my mind, because I'm kind of in everything with the attitude of what's in it for me. And that really flipped things around, and then, Harville Hendricks says the purpose of marriage and of taking sacred vows is to kick up all your earliest childhood wounds from your caregivers. So the purpose of a soulmate marriage is to heal each other, and to heal each other as partners, so that you can fully be as great and as evil as you are and still be loved and be in this container for love, which also makes sense for me. And I've now been married over 21 years, and I have to say I'm a better person today because of who I married. How he is in the world, and how he just bees has grown me into a much better version of myself.
Are you familiar with Stephanie Coons' work?
I am not. I don't know her.
She is amazing. She writes about the history of marriage, and she kind of stumbled into it. I think her book is called Marriage: A History, or The Way We Never Were. And she goes into the long-term, history of marriage. And marriage, the concept of romantic marriage, has only been around for about 250 years, the mid-1700s. Before that, marriage was really for land rights and property, and making sure that you're passing on your land to your actual kin. And so it's really interesting when we look at the history of marriage, we think back, oh, it was better in the 1920s, or oh, it was better in the 1940s. There actually isn't this ideal state. And so really, it's like marriage is a contract that I can understand appeases the vigilance center, the amygdala of your reptilian brain. At the same time, it's what you bring to it. And when you describe it, I can feel you bringing all of you. When Harville Hendricks, I'm a big fan, DiMaggio, bringing up, you're in relationship to heal those wounds is so magical. And that's my experience. But also know that marriage, the history, is very fascinating in terms of what the original intent was.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of writing a novel right now, and the majority of it takes place in India, and I'm just about to cover a chapter that has to do with arranged marriages, because in India, most marriages are still arranged, and their divorce rate is 1 in 100, right? And here, everybody knows that for 50% of first marriages end in divorce. But what most people don't know is that 62% of second marriages and 71% of third marriages end in divorce, right? Even though you've married 3 different people. And so my belief is the reason why it doesn't work is not because you keep picking the wrong partner, is that you haven't become the right partner. You're the person who keeps showing up. So, we say that marriages work, and that is totally true, and one way to describe it. But I think another way to talk about it is growth, because you have this constant feedback loop about how you're showing up in the world, and at the same time, for me, the thing that I love best about being married is that I have this safe place to land always. No matter what I do, what I say, where I am, there is somebody there to catch me and to, tell me everything's going to be all right, even on the days I'm melting down. And you can't really put a price on that. So for me, it's worth doing the work and the growth that's required.
Right. And I think that's, why you are who you are. And that's why you are a teacher, is because you're saying this is an inside job. And as much as my wife or my husband or my boyfriend, whatever, is annoying me, what is it impacting? What is it affecting inside of us? The only thing that annoys us is things that are internal. They're mirroring parts of ourselves we don't want to see, especially with kids. If you think about kids, my biggest issues or challenges I have with my stepchildren, I'm always like, okay, what is this about my childhood? What is this about my way of relating to my feminine? What are they informing me? And so do the internal work, look inside first, and then relate to your partner is the way to create that container that you so well described.
Yeah, and I never had kids, so I don't know about that dynamic, but I've certainly observed how difficult kids can make it, because everybody comes having been raised a certain way, and now you have your own kids or your stepkids, and you're like, geez, that's not how you do it, does your wife give you permission to parent as you would like to parent, or how do you work through that?
It is extremely challenging, because I grew up in the time that my dad had the belt and my mom had the brush, and so if you were out of line, you were hit. And so that's the way I grew up. Morgan, my wife, she does what's called hand-in-hand parenting, which is the opposite. It's the allowing of the children to have the full spectrum of their emotions, which often the way they treat her is just like shudders me, and the lack of discipline. It's crazy for me. And I know there are things that I want to learn from her. Morgan has taught me so much in terms of validation and patience and holding. And so I'm a student of her work with the children, because it's evolved all my relationships. It's never easy, but it's always rewarding.
I saw a meme on Facebook yesterday that totally cracked me up, and it was a Post-it note on a kid's bedroom door that said, clean up your room, and when you're done, send me a picture. Take the dog for a walk, and then send me a picture. And when I get these 2 pictures, then I'll tell you the Wi-Fi password. And I
I
thought,
like that.
yeah, that's sort of a non-invasive way to, get things to do something. I'm a big fan of manipulation when it's called for.
Of course. Yeah, we're all, yeah, definitely.
So tell me what it is you love most about your wife.
My wife is the most curious person I've ever met in my entire life. She is inquisitive on all levels. And I'm a really inquisitive person, but takes the cake. And so from this inquisitive nature, we have gone on so many journeys together to explore the richness of life. And her permission for all of me to bring out what's part. And I piss her off and make her mad from time to time, no doubt about that. I do stupid things, definitely say stupid things. But her curiosity allows me to be fully who I am. And I've never experienced that fully with another person, let alone another partner before. And it's just like we're constantly talking, and we'll go to bed at night. And she's like, and we're just like back and forth, pillow talk about the day and the experiences and things she read and some of the kids did. And so it just creates so much motion and energy between the two of us. And she's amazing.
Oh, it sounds a lot like Brian and I. Yeah, we're just constantly talking. So, what advice do you give singles looking for a partner? What would you say the most important things are to look for? Because I know so many people are, they go into the state that I call the socially acceptable form of insanity, which is the being in love state, and they think that's it, you're the one. But what advice are you giving these days?
Well, just know dating is getting harder, especially for people, I think, of the demographic you mentioned before. It is getting harder. So just to give you reality that the world is making it more difficult for people to find someone they want to be with. That's the first thing. The second thing is to continue to raise the bar for each other of what's acceptable. Know what your bottom lines are in terms of your relationship across the board, and communicate them and invite them, not demand, invite them if they're not reaching some part of it. So if a man's not a great communicator, just know that this is something that's important to me. How do we work at this together? Invite him into a game of hitting your bottom lines. In other words, don't shrink. Keep being, even if you can't find someone, have patience. I would much rather you be alone and expanding and working on yourself and building up your light than to be in something where you have to shrink and make yourself small. And I know it can be difficult to be by yourself, but again, keep knowing what you want, who you are, and that person will show up.
Yes, I totally agree with you. One of the ways I like to break it down is to know for certain what your three must-haves are and what your three deal breakers are. So
Exactly.
you can sort more quickly. So if one of your must-haves is, somebody who leads a healthy lifestyle or somebody who's financially responsible, which I think are two critical must-haves.
Exactly.
And something shows up where, they're snorting cocaine and eating fried chicken every day. That's a pretty
Yep.
clear indicator. They had 3 drinks at lunch, right? It's like, there's no fixing this. And I know at least for women, quite often, they meet somebody and they have sex too soon and the oxytocin's flowing and they get bonded and then they step over all their boundaries and then suddenly they're shocked that they've married somebody who's not who they thought they were. So it's important to know that. Well, we've got just a minute left. Any final words, and tell people how to best become more acquainted with you?
I think the most important thing is that we beat ourselves up for not being A, B, and C, or not being in the right place, or not in the right relationship. And I just want to say to everyone listening that I think you're doing it right. I think you're doing amazing, and you can always do it better. Perfection includes the propensity of change, your ability to expand. And so just one person saying to all your listeners that you're doing it right and you can always do it better. And the way people can find me is via my website, robertkandell.com, my podcast, my writing, my book. There's 3 free audio chapters. I read it myself. My 3 favorite chapters are available if you want to take a listen. And everything can be found at robertkandell.com.
Thank you, Robert. This has been really fun. Okay, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Welcome to Big Love with Ariel Ford, known as the Cupid of Consciousness and the Fairy Godmother of Love. Ariel and her guests will share with you the secrets to finding and keeping the love of your life, as well as ways to make your life a spiritual adventure. Join us now for a heart-opening and inspiring hour.